Right. It's 11 o'clock. My name is Greg Chambers. Welcome. This is I think it's number 5. I need to double check. It may be number 6 in our series, our lead generation webinar series. We have a dozen of these planned, and this is somewhere towards the middle. But today is getting more leads from your website. Specifically, this is a different way of saying search engine marketing and specifically SEO, search engine optimization. So in this, we're going to run past some of the stuff that you can read anywhere, which is like tags, how to tag your site, making sure that your website is fast, that it's responsive to mobile and tablet devices, and that it's professionally designed. And we'll get into hopefully some new ideas. If you have a topic you want me to cover, by all means, let me know. So this is what today's agenda is, the introduction. We're doing that right now. And then we're going to frame this content, or I was trying to come up with a different way. Every time I say we define the content, but basically just try to get on the same page with a few ideas. And then I'll jump right into the 5 ways, things that you can do right now that will help generate more leads from your website. And then we'll summarize. And that's usually when I can pick up on any questions. If there are anything, if there's anything that you're dying to know that you're burning to have happen. So before we begin, I'm going to double check the chat box. If you have a question that you want me to cover today, this is the perfect time to throw it in there, because then I can address it as we run across it. And if not, we're going to jump right in to what happened. So in today's agenda, of course, this happened this week. So I had planned this. So we planned this months ago. And as this topic rolled around, this jumped into the week in the news, right? President Trump, and he put this right up on top by saying, the Google search results are biased. And great conversation, at least that popped up in my little world where I pay attention to search engine marketing. And what ended up happening was if nothing else, it really revealed that there's a lot of people who have no idea how search engines work, even though we use them each and every day. And why, as marketers, we should be just investing a little bit of time into learning how to make it work for us. So I'm not going to get into all the details of how of all the people who revealed that they really don't know much about anything that's happening out there. But at the same time, it's really this topic. It's how do you get it? You can't necessarily dictate the search engines to give results that you want. So if you can't dictate it to them, because if it's so user driven, how is it that you can jump up on top of it? The reason this is an important topic today is because social, especially Facebook, it was a heavy lead generation tool just not that long ago. A few years ago, everybody was on social media and saying, this is how we can generate our site traffic. And that has dropped over time, and search, which had been number 1, was replaced for a brief period of time, and now it's coming back on top. And why is the reason for that? Well, let's get it straight. When I talk about social, I always think of that as an interruptive marketing activity. So anything that, if anybody's on Facebook, they generally want to be on Facebook to use Facebook. Whereas search, it continues the user's activity, right? They're bringing their intent to the search engines, and you're just trying to be part of that conversation as it goes through there. So what had happened in that time period when social traffic was to websites and lead generation was climbing is they weren't really charging for ads, right? They weren't forcing us to use ads. That's when we could have like a Facebook company page that got put into people's Facebook feed and would generate leads. And slowly over time that got squeezed, and the way to generate leads now from social is to buy ads. And that really isn't all that much different on search, but you can still get organic activity from search. We're going to be talking today about this side of the realm, which is we figured that our users have, they are expressing some intent, they are trying to get something accomplished, and then we're going to help them get there. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And then another thing that I want to point out when it comes to search engines is this just happened to me too. I just dropped my kid off at college, and in the dorm was a branded Amazon dot. So we're living through this this change where the robots are teaching us how to talk to them. So I dropped my kid off. Dot is, and I don't know if you've ever heard anybody try to talk to this thing, but listening to the boys who are super tech savvy try to communicate with this this Amazon, I think it's what it's called, an Echo Dot. It reminded me of, I just was listening to a Radio Lab, More or Less Human, where it's all about the Turing test, how we can tell whether or not we're talking to a robot, and who can decide whether or not we're talking to a robot, and this natural language processing. And they were saying, well, that's it, right? These robots are fooling most of the people. And then somebody pointed out, well, actually, it's because we're communicating via text with them, and the robots are actually teaching us how to communicate with themselves. The search engine, if you think of it as a big robot, if we think of our website as part of the big robot, it's a little bit easier to frame out what the rest of this discussion is going to be about. So we know our customers do these exact, right? If we're learning how to talk to our robots, if my kids are learning how to talk to this Echo Dot, then we got to figure that all of our customers are doing roughly the same thing. So the more we can make our website fit into the way that robots are thinking, the easier it is for us to generate leads. So with that in mind, let's talk about the 5 ways that I can give you to help generate more leads from your website today. The first one we'll talk about is tracking. The second one is the Search Console, which there's also news about that this week. And then we'll talk about keywords, the no-guess method that we use here at GoLeads, and then our the lead generation service company, the Lead Gen Compass, and then how to match content to the decision process of our customers, and how to build instantly useful content. I'll give you a little tool that we've been playing with that we've had success with over the last year. So number 1, track it. You can't, right? What I mean by this is, if you can't measure it, it's hard to manage it. So when it comes to lead generation, when we're first talking to people, one of the first questions that we ask them is, how do they measure, like how many web leads are they generating right now? And if that's a hard question to answer, that's usually the first place we got to get started with, right? Because if the first question is, how do we measure it? Then the next question is, what is it now? And then the third question is always, what do you want it to be? And that's that value of the difference. If you're trying to sell this, so if you're trying to sell this to ownership, that delta, that difference between what it is now and what you want it to be, the value of that difference is what justifies any investment in helping with lead generation. And we'll get into, as all 5 of these come together, you'll see why I think the juice is worth the squeezing on there, because that's right, why it's important to be able to measure all this stuff. You need to be able to answer all these questions, like where does traffic come from? How are they, what are they doing when they're on the site? How many take the actions that we want on the site? How much did it cost for each visitor? How much does it cost for each new visit? How much was it for each action that they took? How would you know if they converted? These are all leading indicators that most marketers are familiar with, that your CFO, your owner is usually more interested in just how much did it cost? How much was it cost for each of these customers? But again, the first way to get on top of this is just to have these measurements in place and then break them into those 2 pieces. I probably should have labeled it, but if on the left is leading indicators, then on the right is our lagging indicator, right? It's our how much did all this cost? We were just working with a new e-commerce client, and the CFO was asking, as we're ramping up a brand new site for them and new traffic, there's no sales. And so her question is why are we doing this? So we had to walk her through this whole process, because the goals that we had set up for this website were more, they're starting out as, the first thing we'd like them to do is to pick a product and add it to the cart. And so if that's part of the journey towards making a sale, how many of those are we generating? And I was showing her, so for the first money that we'd spent, to get anybody to add anything to the cart, we were probably paying upwards of $400 on that. So that's a cost for an add to cart. I guess you'd consider that a cost per lead. And that has now come down so that we're getting add to carts at around $40. for this last batch of advertising, but man, the first sale that comes through that any of these channels is going to be expensive, right? Upwards of a few $1,000s. What was interesting is in talking to the CFO is that she totally gets it, right? I mean, but it's in the language that she's after, which is how are we managing, like what are the numbers? And if we can measure it, we can manage it. And that's really what this is. And if you want to generate more leads from your website, this is the first part, is to get this piece down so that you have measurements that are meaningful. If everything on the left is, at one point it got branded like vanity metrics, but they're metrics that they don't really mean all that much. Like, oh, traffic was up 40%. Well, what does that mean? Where is it showing up along the, in the pipeline? Where is it showing up towards the end? Being able to put measurements on there. It doesn't mean it's like cost accounting, right? It doesn't mean that we're going to be able to eliminate all these different costs. It's a management tool. If we can drive those numbers down, number of sales up, cost per lead down, generally that's good for a business. And that's how we'll go from there. Number two, the second way is Search Console magic. And I said, what is it? It's, well, the user right? If we feel like our user, our prospects are telling the search engine what they're asking the search engine for information, telling search what it wants, I want those terms, right? If I could get into my prospect's brain and have them have them give me the exact terms they type in as they're researching information, as they're trying to work towards my website where we'd be able to convert them into a lead. I want those actual terms. And what had happened is Google, I don't know, I want to say like 2011, 2012, it used to all be in analytics. You could just go in there and you could see all the terms that people were typing before they were coming to your website. And then, citing privacy concerns, Google started grouping those into not set. But still, it was only showing up on like 20, 30% of the searches. We could still see the rest. Well, then it started climbing over 50%, and our best guesses weren't good enough anymore. And Google created the Search Console to say, hey, we'll lump everything in the Search Console where you can see what the actual terms are. August 29th, this is Google just changed the search query report in the Search Console. Now, the change isn't that big of a deal. Mostly what it's done, like what it's done for me, is it's changed my reporting. So it looks like there's been a big drop in the reporting because some of the numbers that we had pulled from the Search Console aren't showing up anymore. But we can still see what the queries are. And that's what we're after, is as this tool gives us, we can see what we're showing up for. We can see what the search engine thinks, who the search engine thinks we are by studying those queries. So, the reason I want this information, right, is because I want to optimize for the exact terms. I don't want to have to compete with everybody for the broadest terms. I'll use this example. If I sell radiators for big trucks, Mack truck radiators is a competitive term. Everybody is trying to get to the top of that if somebody's searching for Mack truck radiators. Instead, I would like to buy something for a much less search term, but one where it converts and it turns into a lead. So as with the social marketing, they're just forcing us to buy ads to learn this information, but we can still harvest a lot of information from the Search Console. So I suggest you set up Google's Search Console onto your site. That's my way number two. And I'll give you another example. It's when you talk about specific terms. I used to run a tropical Hawaiian shirt company. And the best term, if you had to take a guess at what the best term for a Hawaiian shirt seller online is, right, you'd think Hawaiian shirts, right? Well, actually, our very best term was tropical shirts. For whatever I paid for that, I want to say it was, in my mind, it was like $5 for a new customer. And our average sale was upwards of $75. So paying $5 for a new customer for tropical shirts, it was great. There just wasn't enough people searching for tropical shirts. But our very worst term, one of the ones that never converted no matter how much traffic we sent, was the word Hawaiian shirt, or the phrase Hawaiian shirt. And it was Hawaiian shirts we did get business from, but Hawaiian shirt didn't get any from. Why? I have a lot of reasons why, guesses as to why, but in the end, I don't know. why it was. So all that information, though, comes from working inside of the Search Console, working on your reporting in analytics, and tying all those things together. So still hook up the Search Console, even though this week there's been some changes to it that are not insignificant. But just know that we're still, that user intent detail that we're after, it's still going to require some teasing out. So let's get into how we do that. That's actually way number 3. Keyword research. This is our no-guess method for how to do it. So let's see, what did I say here? Buyers. Oh, this is invest in keyword research. Unfortunately, where we could do a lot of it for free or just sweat equity before, sweat cost, a little bit of elbow grease, and we could dig in there and find it. Now we need to actually invest the elbow grease and purchase it. And so we use Google Ads to do this so that we can get into the no guessing method. So am I in the right place? I'm not in the right place. I jumped ahead of you. Actual terms. Well, I hope what I said just made sense, because I jumped ahead on this. Oh, and Wilson's angry at a squirrel in the live. You can hear him growling. So in this, what we're doing is we're by buying these terms. So if we're going back to that Mack trucks and selling it, we're actually buying the terms by buying ads on these terms. Google almost, I think they're required to. They have to show us exactly the term that we've been searching on. So you can look under keywords. So by investing, we can actually get into those exact keywords. So these are actual search phrases from real people. When we show these to clients, oftentimes they say like, oh, it's misspelled, like Freightliner. There's no such, Freightliner is one word, blah, blah, blah. This is what people actually type in for these things. It includes misspellings. It includes things like, hey, Google, that they're doing to, or launching Siri or Google or whatever it is that they're doing at first. But if you can pull in there, the interesting thing is you can start to tease out where they are in the decision process when they're doing their searches, right? About halfway down the road, somebody has actually typed in a part number. It looks like CXU 612. That is probably late in the decision process. But some of these searches, right? Like how much does, how does this work? How do we, to delete the DPF, whatever the diesel particulate filter is, if you know anything about trucks. This is where that information comes from. So if the Search Console was giving this to us before, right now we have to go buy it, but it's still, as you're trying to generate more leads, it is worth the investment. And let me give you an example of that. Because I say it's worth it because as buyers are changing, it's no longer buyer beware, right? That used to always be the thing that we would say with to the general public, right? Is a buyer beware. If you're going to be buying something from somebody, you better know where it's at, because the old way, it really was, if the middle part, how people make decisions is it starts with the problem, then we research ways to solve it, we find options, and then we work towards the best deal. If that's the path that our customers are going on, there was a time in there where we had all the information as sellers. So that research phase usually involved getting in touch with the seller before we could ever get to what it was that we were going to purchase. The new way, right? All that information, all of our research, our options, that best deal, all of it is online. And so the only thing that we start needing salespeople for are to take orders. Now, I know this isn't true, but this is certainly the way that a lot of our buyers operate, under the assumption of I can find all the information I need to find, and then I can make my own decision. I don't know. We know that they may not be making the right decision because, right, they do this rarely. We, being in our, whatever our business is, we do it every day. So we can help them with, these are some options you didn't consider. Here's some research that would have helped earlier in the process, but you're contacting me all the way at the end. So how is it that we play earlier in the process? Going back to those actual search terms, right, where we can see, like, these are research type searches. Anything that's how, why, what, that begins with any of those terms, we can start to pull that out, and we can make content on our website that helps people earlier in the process. So before, where I might have had to train my salesperson to know everything there was to know about whatever these are, radiators on the DD15 Detroit radiator. Going forward, I can not only train my people, but I got to get that same information out there. The good news is that all that information is probably sitting inside your company right now. So how do we do that, right? And when you say, gosh, Greg, what do you mean we could put that information online? Now, if I go and take one of these searches, which is how to delete the DPF and regen, right? If I just type that into Google, I get a bunch of things that happen on here. The first thing is, I love special report, but that arrow up at the top, one of the first things it's pointing to is there's no ads up at the top of that. There's ads on the side on the shop at Google. If you were doing, you have to build a special feed to get into those ads. But for the most part, it's ad less because it's people searching for information, right? Google wants to sell more ad dollars. That's how they make money. But the only way they can do it is by making the search engine so useful to people that they continue to use it. So the first things that they're serving up top are the things, right? They're going out. It's the wisdom of the crowd, right? Everybody keeps voting on these. If I search for this and I click on the first result and I never come back and search for it, Google assumes that must be a good answer. By the way, I say this, I don't actually know how the whole thing works. It just, this is the way it works in my head. And then using this is how we generate leads by doing that. So special report, awesome. The people always also ask, those are other ways of phrasing. We talked at the very beginning about how we talk to these robots and the way that they're teaching us with how they process our language. You know, is it legal? Is it legal? Is it illegal? Those seem like the same questions. What does an EDR kit do on a diesel? By putting answers to those questions where they make sense, right? If it's a question that none of your buyers would ever ask, why put any, you don't need to put that information out there. It's probably still not your customer. But if it is something that your people would ask, especially in this case where somebody might do it themselves or be looking for a way to get around the cost of these, because I don't know if you can see in the upper right, DPF filters are $2,500. So if you were an independent trucker, $2,500 is probably a chunk to invest in. So you're trying to look for some workarounds. Even though you sell a particular product, it may be content that you want to make that fits into that. And so that's what we suggest. And we call it long tail searches, right? But it's going back to that Mack truck radiators is hard to compete for, but how to delete DPF and a regen system on a DDF Detroit. Content around some of those searches is a lot easier to compete with or compete for, and you can get your brand in front of people. And going back to that rule of 30, if you've been to any of these webinars before, the idea that 1 out of 10 it takes 10 exposures to a message for an idea to get through, and then 1 out of 3 messages gets through. So you need to come up with 30 exposures so that people know who you are and what it is that you do. This all ties into this idea. So that's way number 4 is segment, put the content where, aim for content that it describes what the problem is, aim for content that helps with research. Yes, that means that you may need to put some competitor information in there. And then options should always be including your own stuff. And then obviously, if somebody's coming in on, I need a new Mack radiator, that should be all selling at that point. And again, you need to take these examples and kind of spin them around so that they fit you and your particular business. Okay, the way number 5 is something we've been messing around with. I don't know if you've been to the GoLeads site lately, but in the corner, what we did is we added a chatbot. And it's not a regular chatbot. This one that we're using is from Drift, a company called Drift. And you probably see these if you spend any time online. Drift is moving around. But one of the reasons why they're popular is because you can design interactions, which is, to me, a way of adding content. So when people first come to the site, one of the first questions that we have when we looked at this is, welcome to GoLeads. Is this your first time to the site? And we can help them if they click on this and then they answer the questions, we can help them design content. So changing our site, so the reason that we went with this is changing our site is a big deal. It's a giant site and there's a lot of pieces on it. So it's a giant project. We would like to know before we make those changes whether or not it's going to work, right? Going back to this, before I start building out these reports, I'd like to have some idea as to whether or not they're going to work. And that takes me all the way back to the measure and manage, right? If I know what it is that I'm looking for, where people show up in my pipeline, and I know what terms lead to that, and I can cluster those terms into a group and build content around it, that's how we generate more leads, by being more valuable to our users. So what's an example? So on our website, the nice part about this drift bot is you can change the message. So if the first message you see when you land the very first time on GoLeads.com is, welcome, is this your first time to our site? If you've completed a search, so you're a different person, right? Anybody who visits the homepage and clicks through a few different pages gets treated differently than somebody who actually took an action that we would be interested in, which is they built a list. In this case, it was like, the company's over 500 employees in Georgia. And when they built that, the question that we're asking is, does that count look right for your market? And when I talk about creating dynamic content that makes sense for people, it's because I can ask these questions, right? So if they click on the bot, it says a good count. Does that count look right for your target market? And it's, yes, I'd like to talk to somebody about it. That's, that goes into a lead sequence. No, it doesn't look right. Offers advice, because we play with the database all day long. So if somebody's like, that just doesn't seem right, the count seems too high or seems too low, we offer some advice. If you clicked on no, it doesn't look right, that would help with the search. The same thing we would say to somebody who's on the phone. And then other people, right? It's like, yeah, that looks right. I'm just doing research. I don't want to talk to anybody. They can click on that and then it will work through. The advantage to us is, like, we don't use the chatbot like some people do, where we're going to man the chatbot. Our chatbot kind of works by itself, and we have a few different pages that we've plugged in these content enhancements, but it allows us to go through, test it, go back to what we were doing on number one, which is measure it, and we can see what it's doing. And so just as an FYI, on there, after using it for a year, the first thing we saw is that the number of inquiries that came into our queue, our inbound people, the number of inquiries did go down, which on the surface sounds bad, but then what did not change were the number of true sales opportunities that were coming through. So we were still getting the same number of opportunities. What was happening is that some of the questions that people have were getting answered. And what ends up happening, what's interesting in this chatbot, the reason I would encourage you to use it, it's way number 5, not only does it give you rich content, but it generates all these other questions, because people, like we said at the very beginning, people are starting to interact with robots a lot more, and they understand it a little bit more easily. They are, whereas they won't call to ask these questions, they were dumping in questions. I want to say we came up with, within 6 months, I think we had like 500 random questions. And then we had to go through those questions, right? And as a marketer, I'm going through the questions because these are all things that I would consider that our website is not helping them find, or it's not helping them find it easily. A lot of this information is out there. It's just not on there, so or not somewhere where somebody can find it. So the question is, how do we redesign this so that we can actually get this information to them? So, like, is there a way to filter out mall shops, gas stations, fast food chains? Absolutely. Where is a good place to put that information? Right? I can build, the chatbot would let me say, if somebody asks a question like that, I can pull out keywords and give them a response, or we can add that content to the website to make it more useful. Yeah, so my whole point with this is it helps us be better, right? Be best. So by being able to answer the questions on the site, we can generate more leads from the site. What we've seen is not necessarily, there has been a small uptick in the number of leads and a small uptick in the number of sales, but far more valuable is this information that we're getting from people who, who knows what they were doing before, but they probably weren't filling a contact us piece out, sending us an email, or if they were calling it and getting to the reps. Sometimes it's hard to get information out of the reps. to the marketing team where, we say, what are some common questions? And they're like, I don't know, I got to make quota. So I'm going to keep moving forward. And what we can do is we can see what some of these questions are and move forward with them. So it's user-driven fixes. I guess there's my little catch keyword. Helps us figure out where they're at in their sales and their decision process, and then we can better be there when we're there. So as a summary, that's what this was about, right? Tracking goals to manage your spend so that you can generate more leads. If you want more leads, the question is, where are you at? How do you measure it? What is it today? What do you want it to be tomorrow? And then can we figure out some value of the difference so that we can figure out what's worth investing in? Turn on the Google Search Console. If you don't have that on already, there's a lot of good things in there, and then you need to actually actively use it. One of the first things that popped up, as a matter of fact, inside of Search Console is it gives error messages like that don't show up on your site, but it's robot error messages. Like, we're having a hard time combing this, or this, there's issues with your website. The Search Console will give you those things. So if nothing else, it gives your technical people something to do to keep your website up and moving. Keyword research, we covered our no guess method, which is, yes, it means we kind of have to pay for it. We can get a little bit of it from Search Console, not as much as we used to, but we can still get all of it as of today from AdWords. I am making no claims that I know what Google is going to do, because AdWords is now called Google Ads. So constant change, which is good for all of us, I guess. Gives us an opportunity to compete. And try to segment your content for what stage in the decision process there are. It used to be that it was all sales person driven. And I know a lot of our businesses still are. We have a consulting arm, which is really mostly face-to-face, as opposed to some of the online things that we do. But this online piece is, again, everybody assumes that the information they want is out there. And if they have the time, they will search for it. And so try to be there when they're there. And then try out this tool, Drift. I don't get anything for saying that. As a matter of fact, it probably costs me more. They'll figure out a way to charge me more. But I have found it is a great way to get content onto a site and to actually have a regular sales conversation. I won't say that 1 million users are using it. I know that they have some fantastic stories on their website. For us, it's very similar to other tools that we've used. The money that we put into it over time tends to come back out. So we're getting a small return on investment, but it's nothing that is completely changing our business. But this all works together for improvement. You get some parting gifts because you've made it this far into the webinar with us. I wrote a book called The Human Being's Guide to Business Growth, a simple process for unleashing the power of your people for growth. By signing up for this webinar, you'll get a link to a page that will let you pull down this book. It's got some big ideas in there about business growth. It touches on a few of these topics, but it really starts with your people internally and getting them to think this way. Speaking of internal conversations, Bill Matern, the founder of GoLeads, and I wrote this book, The Perfect Growth Formula. And this is really great for an internal conversation. It helps get everybody, it's almost like that framing exercise we did at the very beginning. It's a way to define things so that it makes conversations about lead generation flow smoother inside your company. And then our new service is Lead Gen Compass. And which is why we're doing a lot of these webinars, because this work that we talk about in each of these dozen lead generation webinars that we're doing, this is all work that we're doing for companies right now. And we've been signing people up for our pilot program. It'll probably go live. We'll just make it probably 2019 to make it easy to make it official. But Lead Gen Compass is something that you will sign up for, and you will get a call from John. So John Regani is helping me with that, and he will be calling to set appointments for people who are interested. So thanks for following up. More information can be found. So, hey, marketing coach, if you need more information, or if you want to talk about any of these topics that are related to the content we just did, but you want to specific for your business, let me know. You can reach us, GoLeads.com, leadgencompass.com, 334-1824. I'm extension 1012. My name is Greg Chambers once again, and then info@goleads.com helps with that too. So how did I do here? I'm looking at the Q&A. It's empty. I'm looking at the Zoom webinar chat. It's empty, and it's 35 minutes. All right. So thank you for attending, and I will sign off. Have a great weekend, long weekend. Have a great long weekend.